This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to
Welcome to In or Out, a rapid-fire game where we discuss a handful of NBA topics and determine where we stand. I'm Tony Pesta, joined by Jackson Flickinger and Corey Walsh to deliver a full preview of the upcoming series between the Boston Celtics and Cleveland Cavaliers. But first, Corey, since you weren't with us for our recap of Round 1, which is available now, let us hear your quick thoughts on that roller coaster that was Game 7.
Well, I unfortunately had to watch the game post knowing the results, so I kind of went into it with a more upbeat and just being like, how could we have completely flipped the tides within two halves? Because I saw at half where I was that the Cavs were down 10, and I was like, well, this sucks. Saw that they were shooting poorly from three, which after finding out the final score, I'm like, oh, they must have really turned it around. And it turns out you didn't really have to beat the Orlando Magic. And that was what was really impressive, I think, is that the Cavs kind of went back to what was working in games 1 and 2, where you're just kind of daring Orlando to shoot the shots they were hitting in games 3 through 5, pretty much. And then once Franz became mortal again, it seemed as if the Orlando Magic offense kind of sorted itself out. I mean, once you kind of see how the trio of Suggs, Boncaro, and Wagner really struggled in the second half, and the fact that Mitchell and Strus playing well in the third quarter really seemed to turn the tides. It's something that I feel like at least makes you feel better about this team going against the juggernaut / buzzsaw of the Boston Celtics, but not good enough to where I'm still in a position to be like, all right, let's go get them, fellas.
You're Boston Celtics.
Of course.
No.
I agree with what you said there. I think knowing the results before watching must have lowered your chance of a heart attack there. So that's nice for you. I'm glad that it wasn't as stressful as it was for everyone else. And actually, I want to say, because I meant to say this on the last episode, I kind of completely forgot. Credit to Orlando. Shout out to the Magic. That's a promising young team. I want to give credit where it's due. I know some of the comments thought that we've been disrespectful to the Magic throughout our previews. I don't really think we've done that, but I just want to put it out there that shout out to Orlando. Banchero's a young and upcoming superstar. They fought like hell for 7 games.
It's not insulting. Sorry. It's not insulting to say though. Oh my God, Jackson!
You can't say I'm sorry and then not let the other person talk. I'm sorry.
Jackson.
I'm sorry means the other person.
We're in playoff form right now.
If I say I'm sorry, then it's Corey. You take over.
You never apologize.
Well, that's because you beat me to it, because you're just such a nice guy, and I am who I am. I was just going to say really quickly that I feel like we were very nice about the Magic, especially in the beginning, when we were like, well, we could see this going really ugly for the Cavs, and that was because of who the Magic are as a team. So I think it's fair to say a team like the Cavs who went all in for Donovan Mitchell and sacrificed control of their first round pick until 2030, they should have expectations of beating the Orlando Magic, who are very early in their life cycle as a team. They have not gone all in. I saw reports from somebody about them wanting to get Klay Thompson. I can't think of a worse way to derail all the good stuff you have going on, but you guys can do that. So, yeah, the Magic have been good, but I think it's still fair to say, hey, we expect way more than this from a Cavs team that went all in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're at different places. Go ahead.
It's not. I just don't feel like it's insulting to say that the Magic were. I feel like all we were stressing was what the Magic throughout the whole season weren't strong at, and that's what the Cavs should expose, which was their weakness in perimeter shooting. And overall, they didn't have a point guard, so they relied a lot on Paolo Banchero for ball movement. And then Franz in the regular season didn't look great, and then in like a huge stretch of the postseason actually was playing well. So you have to kind of. In the postseason, you're just trying to expose warts, and that's all we were telling the Cavs that or explaining the Cavs should be doing, and it just didn't fall their way for 3 of those games. It's not necessarily the Magic are terrible. You can't be terrible and be in the postseason. Like, you can't dismiss that pretty much.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting that you brought up like they were daring the Magic to shoot, and they were daring the Magic to shoot, and in the first half they were hitting everything, it seemed like, and
they
that's
almost
where
beat us off that.
right, and that's where the game was running away. Second quarter, 29 points. That was a lot of that was coming from outside shots. So, the Cavs stuck to their guns, but they almost got burned.
The thing that gets buried in that game too is if Orlando hit those shots, that third quarter could have easily reversed into Orlando having that type of swing and not the Cavs. The Cavs really benefited off those misses and not letting Orlando be stationary on defense for a lot of those points.
And this is going to be the most on-brand thing I've ever said, but the Magic could have capitalized more in the second quarter, and I feel like those 2 threes from Sam really did something. Like, and
Really
the same with like
stopped them dead in their tracks.
Well, and the same with Karis LeVert because they were having no on-ball creation. Donovan Mitchell was 2 for 10. Darius Garland was
like 1 for
missing
9
in action.
He hasn't showed up yet
because of foul trouble, and when he was playing, he wasn't playing good. So they really needed Karis to really step up. They really needed Sam Merrill to really step up, and they did. And you were talking about how when you saw the score at halftime, that was a 10-point game, you were discouraged. It was like when we saw that it was a 10-point game. It felt...
the deficit felt worse. The 10-point...
18.
Yeah, the 18 felt worse. The 10-point felt really good.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's like...
Sorry.
Yeah. We're on the same page here. We're all on the same page.
We have some
overlapping
overlapping narratives here to start off. But no, I think the most important thing, and then we'll get into our preview here. I think the most important thing in that second quarter stretch was that it brought the crowd back into it. It gave them hope. As you were just saying, that 10-point deficit felt pretty good considering for a second there it could have been 20 or 30 again, as we saw earlier in that series. So again, shout out to Orlando. I don't think any of us were attempting to disrespect them at all, just by saying that we think the Cavs are expected to beat a team like Orlando at this stage after making that Donovan Mitchell trade. But finally starting our preview of this round 2 matchup and what can often be the most important factor in any given playoff series, who will be the best player on the floor, and can it be Donovan Mitchell? Jackson, let's start with you. Can Mitchell be the best player in this series?
He can be. I mean, how many players in the league are capable of scoring 89 points in 2 straight closeout games? 89 combined points. So that's something that Donovan Mitchell can do. We know that Jason Tatum can do that. Jaylen Brown is very good. I don't think he's up to that level yet, but it's a tall task to be the best player in this series, considering the limitations that I think the Cavs offense has and how much they rely on Donovan Mitchell to kind of do everything at this point in a way that Boston doesn't for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So yes, he can be. Would I bet on it? Probably not, but I think Donovan's going to go out swinging. I think that's something that we've seen that he's going to do.
I think in order for the Cavs to win this series, Donovan Mitchell has to be the best player, which is the most obvious statement to say, I feel like, for analysis. But it's true. I mean, we've been saying it all season. This team goes as far as Donovan Mitchell will really let them go. Their best moments in the season come when Donovan Mitchell is playing at his best. Their best wins and most impressive wins have been on the back of Donovan Mitchell. We saw it in Game 7. We saw it in Game 5. Game 6, I feel like the team let him down. They didn't have to do a lot for them to win that game on the back of Mitchell, and they just fell flat entirely. And I think they kind of learned from that at least a little in Game 7. We were seeing role players step up. We saw Darius step up at certain possessions. And with Mobley, I feel like really stepped up too. But at the end of the day, this Celtics team, by every statistic, has very few flaws, and you just are going to have to go toe-to-toe with them. We know that they can get stagnant offensively. They really don't love to run in half court, but that's where they're most efficient. The Cavs need to get them not in stationary defense in order to or with Orlando to try to beat them. And the only way that happens is when Mitchell kind of pushes it, plays to his own pace, and then the team can follow his lead.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you guys said there. I think Donovan Mitchell has a fighting chance to be the best player in this series, mainly because of the variance that we have seen from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown throughout their career. I think the gap between any of these players, it's not insurmountable. Like Tatum is not as dominant as Giannis or LeBron or Jokic. Like this is a matchup where Mitchell could get the best of them on an individual plane. The problem is Boston as a collective, which kind of brings me to our next topic, which listen, the Cavs managed to keep the lid on Orlando for 7 games, holding them to just 100 points per game. Now, don't check with the Cavs average because it is not higher than that. But nonetheless, the round 1 matchup was a rock fight between two defensive-minded teams and honestly offensively limited teams, something that cannot be said for the Boston Celtics, who finished second in scoring this season. So, Corey, can the Cavs keep a lid on Boston, or do they just stand no chance defensively?
I think the Celtics, for as impressive as they are statistically, you could even see it in the Miami series. Like every team, they're going to go through slumps, and that's kind of when you have to take advantage of what they're offering you. And the reason Miami even won their game was not even because of the defense they were necessarily playing. It's just because the Celtics are filled with a bunch of isolation heavy players. And I've kind of learned by watching them a decent amount that when they have to do ball movement and they can't rely on their individual skill is when they play at their worst. If the Cavs can force them to spread it out versus let Tatum play an isolation game on his own, or Brown play on his own, or White or Holiday, the team is a lot more mortal than you would think by just looking at their stats. I mean, easily any of these players can go off in a quarter. In one game, Tatum went off for like 26 points. Brown did the same the game later. But I think the Cavs, this perimeter defense is not great for the Cavs, especially without Dean Wade out there, which it's kind of showing the state of the Cavs that Dean Wade's presence kind of can help them in this series a lot more than you would think. But the Cavs they're playing into the strength of the Celtics with their weakness on perimeter defense. The Celtics don't like to drive as much as other teams in the league. And if they did, that's why they kind of matched up well with Orlando. But you kind of just have to hope that you catch the Celtics on a cold one, I feel like, to pull out of this series.
I think kind of the difficult thing about what the Cavs are doing is one, without Dean Wade. I think that Dean Wade is super helpful, and this is a series that he'd be super helpful in. I also think that we kind of, I feel like the myth of Dean Wade has grown since he hasn't played, where, I think we kind of overestimate Dean Wade to like
especially
a certain degree.
For this specific matchup,
right,
because of him leaving his body for a quarter.
Yeah, which was sick.
Was.
But what the Cavs really miss, I think, is
Travis Kelce.
Yes. But they Jarrett Allen and Wade being out really limits how you can use Isaac Okoro. And I think that's one of the things that we saw in that Magic series, where you can't down the stretch, you can't use Evan Mobley the same way to guard a Paolo Banchero full time, because you have to have somebody who can get rebounds, and you can't use Evan Mobley in creative ways the exact same way when he's going to have to be basically the primary, the only big on the court. So that also limits the way you can use Isaac Okoro too. And I think that kind of really hurts. And as Corey was saying, they're going to space you out. It's really going to be, they make it a one-on-one game, and they're really good at making the really simple passes. The things that we saw the Cavs do during their 18-2 stretch is they weren't doing anything revolutionary. It was just Donovan was beating his guy. The floor was spaced out. He was making the right pass. That's, it's different, but that's a lot of what the Celtics do. And you got to beat them with being able to play one-on-one defense. And I don't know if they have enough options to do that right now.
I don't want to make it think that I'm overstating Dean Wade's presence on the floor. I feel like it's just more of a overall indictment of how the Cavs don't have much perimeter defense help, and just the inclusion of Dean Wade massively improves it, because everyone else by default is not great at it. And we were just lucky that Orlando didn't take advantage, except they did, but it was more miscommunication, I felt like, and the Cavs willing to give those up. It didn't feel like many were ultra contested. The Cavs were just kind of baiting them into it. And if they did the same thing against the Celtics, I feel like even if they're trying against the Celtics, it's not going to be the same story.
Yeah, well, you can't. Yeah, you definitely can't. There's nobody on the Celtics you want to bait into shooting. Like that's, and that's
Luke
what makes it
Cornett.
really tough.
Yeah. No, I love the points that both you guys are making there. I think one thing that Jackson was mentioning is that since Allen is not going to be out there, that means you can't use Mobley on the wing, really. You
Hmm.
need someone to be that full time rim protector. And so he won't be able to guard Tatum or Brown as often as you might want to. We saw this in Orlando. Mobley was fantastic on Banchero, probably the best individual defender on Banchero that we had. But you can't have Mobley standing 15, 20 feet away from the rim if Allen is not back there to help him. So that's an issue. The other issue, they don't have a wing. The lack of a wing on this roster is really going to haunt them. That's where Dean Wade was basically their closest thing to being a wing. He was honestly very impactful this season as a wing
Hmm.
stopper. Orlando, again, credit to them. They just didn't have the offensive firepower to really punish the Cavs for their lack of a wing. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, even Derek White, Jrue Holiday, they can all torch you. I'm looking at Garland, Mitchell, and Strus, and that is a lot of weak points defensively for players as strong and sturdy offensively that we just talked about in Tatum, Brown, White, Holiday. There's just a lot of opportunities for them to match up Hunt that doesn't make me feel great about. I think Derek White in particular is going to terrorize the Cavs. For Cavs fans, think Josh Hart on steroids, basically. I think he's going to grab a lot. Like, just get ready for the Derek White triple-double in game 2. It's going to happen. He's gonna have a game where he just does everything for Boston. And really, you guys both mentioned this. The Celtics kind of live and die on their own 3-point variance, and the Cavs defense lives and dies on their opponent's 3-point variance. So, I mean, listen, there's a chance maybe Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown get a little too cute with their jump shots. Maybe they get Garland switched onto them and they decide to take a pull-up jumper because they know that you just can't get up there to contest. But if they hit threes like we've seen them that they're capable of doing, or if they just put their head down and get to the rim, the only other thing that could save them is maybe Mobley just absolutely dominates another series like we saw. But it's a lot more difficult against a team that can space you out in ways that Orlando wasn't capable of.
Yeah, because you can't really just keep Mobley in like the help position that you could against the
Mm.
Magic, where a lot of the Cavs defense is based on funneling guys to their bigs and then rotating it back out to the shooters, but you can't really do that because I mean it makes it a lot easier without Porzingis because you can't leave Porzingis. You can bait Al Horford into threes, even though he's a better 3-point shooter than he was when the Cavs were, baiting him into threes in like 2018. Um,
Mm.
so that's where it's just really tough to see the Cavs. I mean, playoff basketball is one on the offensive side of the ball. Teams can find ways to game plan around some of their issues on the defensive side, but it's about offensive execution. And if the Celtics are hitting their shots, you're just going to have to hit your own shots to keep up with them. You're not going to hold them to under 100 points. You're not going to hold them. The Magic series, it was like if like you could hold the Magic under 85.
Mm.
If you hold the Celtics under 110, you're probably feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's honestly a perfect transition because I think you're gonna have to win some shootouts if you want to win a game against Boston. And so, speaking of the 3-point variance that I even just mentioned, I'll start off by saying I am in on this upcoming topic, but I'll pass it off to Corey and then Jackson. Is Max Strus the X factor for Cleveland in this series?
When I read this originally, I felt like I don't think Max Strus is the X factor. I actually think Isaac Okoro is the X factor for the sole reason that I think Isaac Okoro is going to be the most valuable defender the Cavs are going to have on the floor. And it's not, it kind of just feels like even though if he plays excellent defense, it's going to feel like you're patching up one hole to expose like 3 others. But also, if Isaac Okoro's offense can stay confident and consistent enough for this stretch where we can warrant him being on the floor, that is the X factor because we saw it in this Magic series. His confidence was fluctuating throughout the series to the point where JB had to pull him out of the rotation towards the end of some games. But I think we need just perimeter defense. Like I said, we don't have a lot of it. And if Okoro can at least knock down a few threes, be aggressive, don't second guess himself if he's open, because if he's open, he should just take it. Or if he has a lane to drive, he also should. But Strus is 3-point variance. I get where the question is coming from. I think is also very valuable.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you say. I mean, basically, for the Cavs to win, they need to have like a perfect series. Like they can't have Max Strus not show up. They can't have Karis LeVert not show up. They can't have Isaac Okoro not show up. But who they really can't have...
They can't have Niang show up.
But listen, we don't need to get into that. But what they can't have is they can't have Darius Garland not show up. So from that standpoint, he's the X factor to me in that he needs to show up, which he didn't do through 3 quarters in Game 7, but he needs to be Darius Garland. He needs to be, the all-star level Darius Garland, the Garland that we saw in 2022, the one we saw in 2023, and not the one that we've seen much this season. I mean, it doesn't really make you feel great about the Cavs' chances if you say they really need Darius Garland to have a chance, but that's kind of how it is. And if you're going, especially if you're going to steal a game on the road, you need Darius going off. You need Donovan going off.
I thought he froze. That's why I was laughing. I was like,
Corey to go away.
We'll get him back in here real quick. When I made the Niang joke, you laughed, but Corey's was stone cold. I was like, damn, he didn't think that one was funny, I guess. And then I looked closer at his camera, and I was like, I don't think he's blinking. So I was trying not to laugh, and I didn't want to cut you off. I was like, I think he might have froze. Sorry for the technical difficulties. If anyone is listening or watching and wondering why there's a weird cut right there, Corey did fall out of the conversation for a second. Wi-Fi issues. I don't know how much of I'll leave that in the edit, but we'll see. To pick up where we left off, I think Jackson basically wrapped up his pick of Darius Garland being the X factor. Corey picked Okoro. I agree with both of those. They're definitely X factors. The reason why I'm going with Max Strus, a couple different reasons here. First off, he has beaten the Celtics team before, so I think that matters. I think having that confidence on his side is something that he could help bring to this Cavs team. But really, the main tangible reason is that, and actually, we should have said this at the top, I think, Kristaps Porzingis not expected to play in this series. I don't think any of us are expecting Jarrett Allen or Dean Wade to be available, at least not for the early stages, if at all. So let's get that out of the way and just say that. And so with Kristaps,
I will say one thing about Jarrett is Donovan mentioned that there is some kind of...
He did, yeah, he had a quote.
He mentioned that there's some kind of comfort in knowing that Jarrett Allen is around the corner. So maybe
he was thinking conference finals.
It's true. The report came out. They truly believe they can win the title.
Yeah.
Well, again, that was...
I would hope so.
That was just Donovan, though. So
yeah, I know. We'll see if that was wishful thinking or not. But at the very least, Porzingis will not be available, which the reason why I mentioned that is because Boston doesn't have that much rim protection back there. They don't have many shot blockers. They don't have the size that Orlando had playing 4 or 6'10" players. And so while I do think the Cavs are going to have a harder time against this point of attack defense, if you think about against Orlando, Garland and Mitchell, they had a lot of success when they were able to get switched onto Wagner and Banchero, even Isaac and Carter. Not as confident that they will have that much success if you're switching Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White. I think there's just more agile wing defenders over there, but there is Al Horford.
I don't know. I would kind of push back because I think the biggest problem with, first off, Jalen Suggs is I think he's a better defender than anybody.
Yeah, but I think they have less weak points is what I'm saying here.
Right, but the Magic could collapse in a way that I don't think the Celtics can. I mean, they can, but there were some possessions where I was pulling up some clips when the Cavs were running with 2 bigs. It was all right. Donovan's beating Jalen Suggs. Okay, now he gets to the rim and he's finishing through Jonathan Isaac and Wendell Carter Jr. It's that's crazy. The Celtics aren't throwing that level of length and size at you. So it's going to be a lot easier. And I mean, it's they're not pushovers by any means. They're really good defenders, but the Magic are really, really good.
That's also because it's
this is what I was getting at. Yeah. Well, this is what I was getting at is that I think the point of attack defense might be harder, but they have way less support on the back end. And that's where I think if Mitchell's able to shred that point of attack defense, if even Garland's able to get down there, Boston might have to adjust. They might have to start bringing people over to the nail to stop drives. They might have to bring that low man over a little early. And that could give Max Strus more daylight than we saw throughout that entire Magic series, where the Magic just had so much size that they could pack the paint and still stay home on the perimeter. I think Boston could be forced to make an adjustment if Mitchell has success getting past that first line of defense, because they just don't have the bodies to stop them once they get past that. And so regardless of if it plays out like that, Strus is still a huge X factor because they're gonna need to win some shootouts. And Max Strus is the guy who they brought in to address that issue from last year. So they need him to have a big series if this is even going to be competitive.
More to that point, maybe this is an easier series to get Evan Mobley the ball down low because the Cavs really struggled to do that in game. Like after Allen left, they really struggled to get him the ball and really get him going. So maybe if you're bringing two to the ball and stuff like that, you have an easier pass to Mobley. So something to keep an eye on.
You're never gonna guess our next topic here, which is
I should really read the text messages.
well, that was a beautiful transition because this is our final topic before we get into some final predictions for the series. But look, Evan Mobley was fantastic defensively in round one, but he struggled to score the ball against Orlando. This is a very different looking defense. While it is still an incredible defense, it's a different looking defense. So do we think Mobley has a better offensive series against Boston?
I've already said my part.
All right. No, I think Evan Mobley, I think the road's kind of built out for him here. He's gonna be playing basically against Al Horford, and then whatever minutes they want to cobble between Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman if they decide that's the adjustment they want to make. I think that the game he played well in stretches against Orlando against arguably better personnel of Wendell Carter and even Mo Wagner, I would say, is probably better than the combination of Cornett and Tillman. Horford is going to be we can't just expect that Al Horford is going to be the player that I think the Celtics need him to be in the series because there's a reason they brought Kristaps in. It's because they want Horford to not play these types of minutes. And also Kristaps is a much better version of what they were going to get out of Al Horford this year. They're trying to phase him out slowly of this lineup, but Mobley has they're building plays for him. They want him to be aggressive. We see these stretches in the first quarter that Jackson always memes at this point that the first quarter Mobley is like the best version of Mobley you'll ever see in your lifetime. But we just need to see flashes of Mobley because they're going to need it's just so cliche to say, but they need the best version of all these players that have been struggling almost all season at spurts. And seeing Mobley play pretty well at the 5 for us kind of thinking that was going to be the kind of what kills the team, I think, overall, just forcing players in uncomfortable spots they haven't had time to develop in under not as much pressure. But Mobley will have to have a better offensive series for this team to kind of get where I think it hopes to be. If he flounders in this series, that kind of just puts the nail in the coffin, I think, for this roster.
Yeah, and I think the bar is relatively low because he was not very good against Orlando. I will say, as far as Luke Cornett goes, just to give credit to Jake and Ben of First to the Floor podcast, the Celtics podcast, they think Cornett's one of the most underrated players in the NBA. So we'll see how that plays out. He could definitely surprise some people, I think. But
I think that Sam Merrill's the most underrated player in the NBA. Does that count for anything? Or,
yeah, sure. I mean, hey, everyone gets their picks.
Just here to say that.
It's too on brand for you to not speak up there, so I appreciate that. But
thank you.
Listen, I think Mobley struggles the most when he goes against players who are physically imposing, who can really rough him up. Now, Al Horford has that old man strength I think we talked about before that can give him some problems, but I kind of like the idea of Mobley having the ball on the elbow or above the break with Horford guarding him because I think he's just too quick and agile for Horford to stay with him. And I think the main reason why I feel more confident in Mobley offensively in this series is that he'll have more opportunities to be crafty and rely on his finesse than he did against Orlando, where it was kind of bang, bang. You have, again, 4, 6, 10 players over there, and you got to find a way to power through them. I think Mobley will have an easier time collecting himself at the rim without all of that size around him. And I do think Mobley has improved in the weight room. He's still not where you want him to be, but I think compared to last year, I think he has improved. He's gotten stronger. I think we might be able to see that a little better against Boston, who's still a great defensive team, but they're not as physically imposing as the Magic were.
It's going to be a really interesting series for Mobley, especially if Allen comes back in the middle, because he's going to be asked to do very different things. And I don't, especially from the offense side of the ball, if, they need spacing, they need to get shots up. So if Allen's here, he's going to have to be spacing out more. And, that's not something he's done he was doing it at the beginning of the series, but hasn't really done it since like game 4. So I don't know. It's just weird. The Cavs have had 2 comeback victories over the Celtics in the last 2 years. You know, the Dean Wade game and then the Grant Williams, I'm going to make both of them game. And both happened because in like the Wade game, Mobley tweaked his ankle or something and left, and then that kind of cleared the way for the Dean Wade game. And then before that, in that
Allen was just unplayable
right
in that one.
He sat the whole fourth quarter, I believe, and then you got a huge offensive rebounding performance from Lamar Stevens. So just
shout out to John.
Yeah, shout out to John. So it's just kind of weird it's just kind of a weird matchup for both of the bigs. And you can kind of convince me on some different things happening, but, you know, because those games in Boston, those were not good games.
Yeah. And while I usually am an advocate for the 2 big lineup, I do think Boston is a matchup where you're not as damaged by losing a big. I think Orlando was like a worst case scenario to lose the bigs. Boston, I think you have a little bit of a better chance there. And, the last thing I'll say on this topic, I think Horford and even Cornette, they're not as versatile as Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter. So if we're thinking Garland or Mitchell getting downhill, I don't trust them as much as I trusted the Magic defenders to contest a floater and drop and then get back to Mobley to give him trouble. You might see more lob attempts. You might see more dump off passes that go Mobley's way. Of course, maybe it doesn't happen. I'm just, this is just our preview. We're not saying anything. It's not locked in. I don't want to get dunked on if Mobley has a horrible playoff series. I'm just saying it's possible. These are the avenues for it to happen.
Maybe this is where the Magic commenters are getting onto us, saying that, comparing Isaac and Cornette's defensive abilities. Come on. I mean, Jonathan Isaac's really good
That's
on
what I'm
end.
saying. Yeah, but
he's much better than Cornette.
Credit. That's the point, though, is that he is way better until Cornette just completely shuts us down, and Jake and Ben are correct on that. So
yeah, I mean, like Gary Harris is good, but Donovan Mitchell's kind of good too. Like that's basically what you were saying.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we might as well move into our final prediction here. Listen, I don't know how much optimism any of us have for this matchup. I think I'm kind of going to be content with a competitive series, but where are you guys at? Jackson, we'll start with you. Cavs, Celtics in how many games?
Celtics in 5.
Celtics in 5.
I think the Celtics give you one. They're prone to do that.
Just hand one away.
I mean, that's what they've.
Yeah.
I mean, they do like doing that. They sometimes like handing 3 or 4 away. So if you're, the Cavs, you hope that's the case. But I think they're going to hand one away. I just need to see more from. I need to see more from Darius before you really talk yourself into it, because you just can't. Donovan Mitchell can't single-handedly by himself beat this team.
Yeah, no. Corey, what about you?
I feel like the Cavs will lose in 6 to the Celtics. I think one of the games will be the Celtics shot is simply not falling. And then the second game they would probably lose would be just a Mitchell game like we saw in game 6 and 7, where he's just dialed in and they just need someone with a pulse to add into it. But I would be honestly floored if the Cavs win this series or even make it to 7 games. I think the Celtics team is just like they're playing at a different level than the Cavs. I think they have more options that if some like Tatum or Brown's not playing well, even one of White or Holiday, as we have seen, has buoyed them to a few wins. So it just comes down to options and talent. And I think the Cavs are kind of outmatched entirely. The same advantage they had over Orlando, which allowed them to win in their 7th game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that advantage is even greater for Boston in this matchup. I think there's a high chance that they just run into a buzzsaw and the Cavs are just kind of roadkill on the way to the finals for Boston. But I do think there are avenues. There are avenues to victory for the Cavs. They've always been a weird matchup for Boston for whatever reason. With that said, I'd probably take Celtics in 5, but I'd be happy if they took it to 6. I wouldn't be like completely shocked if the Cavs took it to 6 or 7, and that's really what I want to see from them. It's the playoffs. Anything can happen. So let's hope some things break the right way for them.
one thing is that it's really weird that the Cavs seem to get these outlier performances against Boston, and
Mhm.
since they only played like 7 times since the start of the 2023 season, it's hard to put your finger on why that's the case. You had the Karis LeVert 42-point game.
Mhm.
You've had Donovan scored 40 plus. There was that one
And like
overtime
most of
game.
those games.
Right, and then there was that one overtime game where Darius, like, it may be the best game that Darius and Donovan have ever played, and it was the first full game
Mhm.
together in the beginning of the
Yeah, yeah.
2023
There's that
season.
lob in overtime.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was. I mean that was probably the most optimistic I felt about the pairing. Um,
It's all downhill
so so
for
and then
Jackson, not for me. Just to clarify.
and then you have like the Dean Wade game.
Mhm.
So it's just really weird. Like, are the Celtics? Is something about the Cavs Celtics matchup allow guys on the Cavs to have those moments because
Mhm.
it's not like the Cavs have those moments against the Bucks or against other teams that
George
are good.
Niang would disagree.
I mean, yeah, but that was like 145 to like 63. Like that,
Yeah,
that wasn't a real basketball game. But you know what I mean. So it's just like
I get your point.
I think that's just happenstance, but maybe there's something there.
Hope so. Unless anyone has any last hot takes that they want to get out before we end up here, I'm gonna wrap.
How many
Luke
games?
Cornett, earth shattering.
How many games do the Cavs need to win for JB to keep his job?
4.
I think we're.
4.
I don't know how to answer that. I don't think there's an answer. I think you should have
You
asked that
mean
last year.
you mean like he's gone no matter what? You think?
Yeah,
So
Mhm.
if he wins 4 games, you think he's gone?
I don't think
I don't think that's happening.
because the
No,
thing
but
is,
if
here's the thing. I might have said this on a previous pod. I don't remember, but if they beat Boston, I don't think it'll be because JB did anything special. I think it'll be the players were just lighting it up. Now, maybe that's unfair to JB. If he proves me wrong, I'll admit it. I don't think he makes the adjustment that gets them over the top or saves his job.
yeah, but if they win and if they beat this Boston team, there's no way they're getting rid of JB.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean,
I
Boston's
think
Boston's probably the best team in the league. I mean,
hmm,
I think the Nuggets are better,
you
but
could yeah, you
they're
could argue a
really
couple other,
close.
but yeah.
So, I mean, if
Okay.
they
I mean, listen,
overachieve, yeah, he's keeping his job. If they win 2 games, he has a good chance at keeping his job.
I kind of feel like I
I
agree
might
with
disagree there.
Tony, where it's like if the Cavs beat the Celtics, it's not because JB outcoached Joe Mazzulla. Joe Mazzulla is like the coach that's always on the hot seat when the Celtics lose their 15th game of the season. Like
Yeah.
they are just ready to throw him to the coals. It's not like we're gonna see a coaching matchup of the ages and be like, holy shit, JB just outcoached Joe Maz. With the guy
Yeah, but
I
who
will
like,
say
The
if they
Cavs
win
are
the
outgunned,
series,
though.
you know me, I might have a different take. But as
Tony
of
by
right
game
now,
2 is like, holy crap,
If
as
the
of
JB is
right now, I
Phil
kind of think
Jackson.
his job is cooked. But I mean, at the very least, I will say if they win the series, you have to have a conversation about keeping JB. Whether it could be a mistake if you base those results on that. But and you know what I will say, because again, I think his job is finished, but he is one of the younger coaches in the NBA. So if he beats Boston, you could say maybe this is a step in the right direction. I'm not entirely sold on it, but hey, this is why you play in the playoffs, because here's his chance. You get another 4 games to prove something, buddy.
Yeah, there's no chance if the Cavs win, he's getting fired. Like that's not
You
going to
heard it here
happen.
first.
I
Breaking
I'm
news.
pretty yeah, I mean, I'm pretty optimistic about his chances of staying. I mean, it's probably more like if they get swept, it's more likely that he goes than he stays, obviously. But if they win 1 game, I think there's a better chance than people would like to admit that he's
I
staying.
think it always comes back to the simple question is, does he have the locker room? Do the players want him to be the coach? And when you looked at them falling down by 18 in game 7, there's been many points this season where people have said, looks like the players have quit on JB. I don't think so. If they were going to quit on JB, it would have happened when they're down 18 in game 7. And in my opinion, I don't think he's lost the locker room, which is, I think, his lifeline is, do the players still want him? Because guess what? If Donovan Mitchell is like, hey, JB's my guy, they're not firing JB because then you're going to lose Donovan Mitchell.
You heard it here first.
I just think that's like.
Well, I still think he's gone. Just for the for the record, I don't think Donovan Mitchell. I don't think JB is his guy, but maybe I'm wrong. No. The power of friendship knows no bounds. Okay, we'll have to wait and see.
I mean, that's what Donovan's trying to give Darius. He's been trying so hard to give him the power of friendship. Hard.
They need
if I give you enough hugs, you will be my friend, and you will make a couple of shots.
On that note, that's all for today's episode of In or Out. Thank you to everyone for watching, and stay tuned because we're going to cover this series for all its glory. With that being said, go Cavs.
I agree, go Cavs. Brian, do you believe in the power of friendship? I messed that up.